Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Who controls the world? Most listeners of the Rogue Ways podcast would scream the answer, the Illuminati! But who or what is the Illuminati? In the words of the foremost scrutinizer, Fritz Springmeyer, the Illuminati are the generational satanic bloodlines which have gained the most power. And that blunt description is about as good as you can get. Yet we see so much hype and propaganda about the Illuminati. As is everything in our modern world, it is mostly illusion wrapped in misdirection. We were never meant to see the puppet masters pulling the strings of every facet of this plane. And when we do start to follow a thread, we often find ourselves mired in the sea of K-Fab that is their most reliable moat for keeping us from their dark castles of control. It takes a heap of discernment to stay on the tracks to discovery of these ancient evil fucktards. And we're here tonight to help you see the slimy trails they've left through the histories and let you decide for yourselves what is true. Helping to part the mists for us, we have here my most excellent and dearest friends, Claude, the wordsmith and philosopher extraordinaire. Claude definitely does not have chlamydia, despite popular belief, and instead has a heap of beauty in his soul that he can't help but spew out at every possible juncture as he wanders through life, connecting the nodes that help light the way to the truth. Claude, my brother and unofficial co-host, thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. It's an honor, always.
And Lee motherfucking Chapman is rolling 3 deep tonight like a badass. Lee is a protector of the innocent and stands at the gates of hell, daring demons to even fucking try him. And those bitches are scared. Lee, the fucking man himself, thank you for being here tonight.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, one and all.
Like how much I had to swear to introduce you?
Yeah, it was a bunch.
We have a
So the pointless question of the episode tonight is this. If you were going to be turned into a Care Bear, what symbol would be on your tum-tum and what would its power be?
You would pick that question after the joke. God. You know what? I'll take it. Give me like just the anarchy symbol, bitch, right there. Boom.
Fuck, you stole a good answer.
I'll just have a big old guillotine on my chest, chop that fucking pedo bear head off.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the Sri Yantra because it's my shit lately and is the key to universal truth. So shit that shit at everybody.
We're all like, straight up raging guillotines and anarchy, and you're like peace and love.
Yeah, gotta balance everywhere. All right. So we're starting our exploration in this 13-part series for the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati. We're kind of thinking of going in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with the Astors tonight. The Astors are one bloodline of the Illuminati. One bloodline that helps control the world in various different ways. So do you guys want to talk about where the Astors come from and kind of where they got their start? Like originally, like as far back as you can go, or?
I think that, Lee, you were going to take this kind of in an occulty direction. So I looked at a bunch of exoteric stuff. How do we want to jump in here? Maybe
start from the back, what you were going to talk about, I guess, with the mysteries, and we'll work forward. Might as well go chronologically.
Well, something I saw said that they come from the Orient and that they have like roots in Oriental magic, but I couldn't find anything else about that and what that even might mean.
See,
that would be like pre-European.
The furthest that I could find where it was like any sort of documentation was they were in Normandy and invaded England in 1066 when I guess before Reformation, whatever. Anyway, whenever the Normans invaded, but from before that, I guess they supposedly came from Italy, Swiss Alps, and Germany. But I don't know if we're going to have access to that particular lineage.
Yeah, it's an interesting tidbit.
It's all speculation too. The black nobility, you hear, stuff about coming from there, pre-Medici and whatnot, but they changed their name so much, it's hard to get any type of official tracking. It's just more hearsay.
So, and the black nobility is the nobility of Italy? That was like...
You're talking about Merovingian bloodlines?
Yeah, the Merovingian, correct. Right.
And what's that all about?
That's a rabbit hole. So we're talking about the bloodline of Christ at that point.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So what the black nobility is supposed to be like the hidden lineage of Jesus if he had a physical child?
Right, from Mary Magdalene.
From Mary Magdalene, correct.
Why would it be
They-
called the Black Nobility?
That is interesting. I don't know. I'm not real sure where that exact term came from.
Because it sounds so dark and evil, but you would think like the offspring of Jesus would be pretty fucking rad.
Yeah, but they did some pretty rough stuff to protect it. Because it was hidden forever and ever and ever.
Right. So yeah, it goes down into Dan Brown Da Vinci Code stuff with the Templars and the Rosicrucians and all that. Yeah, pretty dark, evil shit.
But where the mainstream conspiratists or whatever you want to call us pick it up is around Germany.
Yeah.
So Waldorf, that's where you pick up the trackable lineage.
So, random question. Does anybody know if the Waldorf schooling system has any connection to this family? Or is that just happens to be like a town that they...
I don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah. We'll figure that one out, I guess, on another episode. I'll look it up because I didn't correlate that, but I know now what you're talking about.
It's kind of scary because I always tell people like, yeah, Waldorf is good. You should do it if you can afford it. And now I'm like, fucking maybe you should run from that shit. I don't know.
Yeah, no, we'll have to look into that one for a future episode. That's good find.
So Germanic family, his dad was a Jewish butcher.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So you're talking about John Jacob Astor, right? Or Johann?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, Johann. Yeah. He had the two sons, George, that went to England, and then John Jacob that went to the U.S. after he went to England.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah. If you want to back up and leave anything that one of us says, Claude, just jump in.
Yeah, actually, I had it written down, but there was something regarding the Astors and the actual original quote-unquote Illuminati, Bavarian Illuminati cult that was kind of overt. And I had something that tied the Astors to them from Bavaria. And I don't know, it's not in my notes. So at any rate, that's a thing if you want to go look it up.
Well, if it comes up, then or if you find it, then we can get back to it too.
Well, this was related to where I was looking at current day famous people, and I just happened upon that. And I don't know what the hell happened to it because it was super interesting. At any rate,
another thing. I guess we'll get into that later too. So okay, so how do we know? What do we know about some of their maneuverings to get into power early on in Britain or America?
Oh Lord. So John Jacob Astor, quote unquote, I guess the story is that he was penniless when he came to America in the early 1784. Is that right? I think.
Correct. Yeah.
And somehow or another he became master of the Holland Lodge in New York in 1788. Penniless, he becomes master of a Freemason lodge. So from what I could tell, that was his first major power play. I think he got involved and became a merchant in New York before that when he first got in, and then basically just immediately took over a Freemason lodge. Now, I would assume he would have already had to have connections back in London somewhere, which is the conspiracy theory wants to say, well, they must have sent him to America, right?
Well, his brother George, remember, was already tied in. His older brother was already tied in to British royalty. So his brother is actually the one that gave him the name. I mean, not the name, but his brother's one that actually introduced him into to the power lines.
I know that the Astors, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I know that the Astors currently hold two, was it Viscount and Baron? I don't know if there's actually land holdings associated with that right now, but I know that they hold the titles through their lineage. But I couldn't find how far back that goes.
Well, Fritz himself says that John Jacob was actually British intelligence, double agent.
Yeah.
Actually, so he didn't just come out of nowhere and then yada yada become they didn't talk about it, but somebody that could barely speak English and then within 3 years was running the main Mason Lodge, like Claude said, in the United States. He obviously was connected pretty deeply before he got there.
And didn't he immediately do a bunch of shady real estate deals in New York, which you would have to also be well connected? You can't just jump into real estate when you can't even speak English. And
well, the wacky thing is that he was actually a fur trader, the American fur trading, and he not only did he take over the Mason Lodge, but he also took over the most lucrative thing in North America, which was the fur trade.
Oh yeah, well that's interesting because he actually was one of the first Americans, quote unquote Americans, to make it to the West Coast and take over that fur trade.
Which is why we have Astoria, Oregon, the first American settlement west of the Rockies.
But and then not also was it American fur, but he did it. He vicariously also was in the drug trade through what do you call it? I'm kind of drawing
Prohibition.
No, drugs. Actually, opium.
Oh yeah, true.
Oh, so this has to do with John Jacob Astor. He also got a special deal. I was reading this in the Illuminati Bloodlines, the Astor Bloodline. Anyway, on the CIA website, we found their. Lee and I actually happened upon it separately, so we know John Jacob Astor apparently didn't know anyone, became master of the lodge. Then I don't want to get the timeline wrong here, but in 1807 he actually received special shipping rights from the United States government, from the president, and what's his name? So he was the only one that was allowed to ship goods back and forth in 1807.
Well, they had an embargo on every other person or whatever.
Like, really? Did this know about me?
Yeah, and the conspiracy part of that is that he wasn't just shipping fur; he was shipping, he was bringing opium back from the Orient.
Hey, there's your Orient tie-in too.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. But I mean, he was undermining the entire nation there. So.
Well, that you know what's also interesting about that? There's only one official family that's not of European descent. And that's the Lee family. So I wonder if there's something kind of weird going on there. We'll have to delve into that one too.
Yeah, except
good point.
The Rothschilds dabbled in the Lee family though, so I don't know how pure actually they are, how far back you go.
I wonder how actually incestuous all of these lines are. Are there actually 13 or are they 3? And they all just fuck all the time, change their names.
Thinking that they do, and it's funny because, well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I couldn't find a lot of information about intermarriage, which was interesting. So
remember you have the 5 bloodlines that are actually more pure than the 13.
Right.
So you have the original 5 bloodlines, like where the Queen comes from, the Rothschilds, Ashkenazi Jews. They're actually way more pure. They're the ones that actually, quote unquote, inbred more than your, say, American DuPonts, the Rockefellers. They weren't so much into the intermarrying as much as you go back to the Queen's lines, the Merovingians, and all the Germanic. I can't think of. We'll do that one later. But all the Germanic names, and those are supposed to be the 5 purest. And that's like I said, the Rothschilds. They had no problem with daddy-daughter, having babies all day long.
We haven't even talked about John Jacob's attachment to banking yet either. So we know that he was a fur trader. You know that he was into shipping, possibly shipping drugs.
Opium trade, yeah.
Master of a Freemason lodge, but he was also an owner of banks. He sat on the board of directors of 5 national banks at the time that Alexander Hamilton created, called the Bank of the United States, way back when, before there was any kind of Federal Reserve or anything like that.
Pre-Fed.
Yeah, pre-Fed.
Pre-Fed, yeah.
So the fact that this German-speaking immigrant suddenly rose to that kind of power, man, that says something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then I read something that said they had 1/20th of the New York real estate, and it's like, that's a significant portion of real estate for anyone to have.
Some factors say they traded 1/15th, even more than 1/20th. They had 1/15th of the U.S. real estate that they.
And New York specifically is a really occult center of power and commerce and everything. So.
Well, remember where they came from originally in Germany was a super occult. A place, right. So Fritz and some of the other guys say that's what caused the rise. That's what got him in the door, because the rest of the Illuminati are so fixated with the esoteric part, and his family brought in, witchcraft. Salem, Massachusetts. That was a lot of that blood was actually Astor blood.
Right. So one of their wives was actually convicted of witchcraft, but she immediately got off from the charge, didn't get executed. I'll try to find which one that was. So yeah, I mean Very
So-
connected into a cult.
So if the reason why, most likely why he rose in Freemason fame was the occult side. He had, he had the occult, knowledge and reputation, but he had no money. So he brought in the occult power and name and attached it to all the bankers and the American elite money and formed, the bond with them, which most likely, is why they allowed him to do all the other stuff.
Right. So we're still on the power plays question, correct?
Yeah.
So one big one. We're going to jump forward in time here to 1919. This one really stuck out. In 1919, the Royal Institute of International Affairs was created in England.
Yeah.
The precursor to the CFR.
John Brisson.
Yes. And the Astors were the major financial backers of the RIAA, which is basically the CFR.
It's the CFR across the pond.
Yeah, and I didn't get to go down the rabbit hole of if that's all part of the same thing now, or if they're still separated. But I'm going to dig into that as soon as I can.
No,
I think they have to be
the same thing. It is the same thing. But and all those are subclasses, even to the Pilgrim Society, which supposedly is like where the family heads, make all the real decisions.
So what is the Pilgrim Society?
That's exactly what it is. It's supposedly, if you're a tenfold like we are, that is the heads of the families.
Is that like that's like the 10 heads of the beast or whatever?
Correct. Right.
Now, is that the same thing that they call the round table groups?
Yes, the round table group is the head of the round table group is supposedly the Pilgrim Society.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's where your head of the Collins, the Rothschild, the Rockefellers, the Todds, the Krupps, the name going on. That's where all their family representatives make decisions.
Right.
Chris makes a good point in the group. He says England or London and London. So the city of London, Washington, D.C. and the Vatican are the three places on the planet that are not actually countries, right?
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Their own separate entities.
Bizarre.
So they're in cahoots, as he points out. And they're all owned by the Illuminati.
That's literally the head of the snake. You have the military-industrial complex. You have the city of London, which is banking, and you have Vatican, which is religion. So they control the army, the money, and the land.
Shows you where all the evil is.
And those Khazarians know what they're doing, don't they?
Khazarian. So I also was reading something that said that these Astors kind of, unlike some of the others, maybe prefer not to sit on the boards of things that they control. So they're a little bit more hidden about what they're doing.
Well, actually, all the families do that, technically, except for the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers never have cared. But remember,
I'm wondering if that's something that came later, though, because we know that Astors did sit on these boards, and he was very public about it.
Yeah, because we have like a list of things that they sit on.
Well, but most of their stuff has been discovered. Most of their stuff they weren't.
Okay.
They had proxies, and so did the Rothschilds. A lot of them had the proxies.
So I would imagine that in modern day parlance, it would be sort of like your George Soros types, right?
Yes, that's the way I equate it. Yes, or like what's his name that gave Trump the loan from the Rothschild Bank of America?
Oh, right.
Now, yeah, that would be.
That's how he got his casinos, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that would be their proxy in the United States. It's not a Rothschild. Mm-hmm. That way, it is a Rothschild bank though, but still, he himself is not a Rothschild, and he runs, all the money in the United States.
And these people, like, what? They just get money out of it, and that's it. They don't care about their like eternal soul. Whatever.
See, I don't know if it's all just about the money. See, I think it's all power moves to do things in. I'm going to go a little bit Derek Murphy here, and I think that it's about building things because we know the Freemasons, we know they're about building, but I think it's about being able to take control of certain areas of land. And I'm working on this theory a little bit, but here's a little tidbit that I found that kind of backs this up. So we know the Empire State Building in New York, classic building on the corner of 33rd and 5th Street. But what building was there first? John Astor bought that plot of land.
Correct.
And that's where the original Waldorf Astoria Hotel was built.
Correct.
Knocked down, and now the Empire State Building is there.
Dude, and Chris just pointed out the Astoria is built on the Columbia River, which would be a powerful source of energy, Michael Wan style, Susquehanna River shit.
Right.
So it's there's historically, classically, we all know, you look at all these different ancient megaliths, they're all built on these quote unquote ley lines, areas of power. That's what is it? I can't remember the guy's name. He talks about the name of all the towns that end in TON.
Oh, right.
Boston's, your Austins, all of these places. They're supposedly all connected to that, and that's one of those areas were chosen. It's just, I find it funny that New York is not one of those names.
Yeah, because I mean, Astoria is also connected with a lot of satanic activity, which we can get into, but like, it doesn't end in ton. I think that maybe that's true or not true, but that doesn't mean that a place without the TON ending is not going to be super dark and satanic.
Right. So where?
Oh, okay. So let's talk about the name changes that they've gone through over time. The one I just got to throw out, the one interesting thing is like as far back as it possibly goes is Astarte. How do you say it? Astarte, the mother goddess of the occult worship.
Oh gosh, I didn't even make that connection. To
right? That's
I'm gonna have to try to find that name because that is interesting. Somebody out there will know, right?
Yep.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but
yeah, he Fritz talked about that.
It's Astaroth, right?
Astaroth is a different thing, I think. This is Astarte.
Well, Astaroth, according to Google, in demonology, is the great Duke of Hell in the first hierarchy with Beelzebub and Lucifer. So, hey, there you go.
I'm gonna go with that etymology instead. That sounds more fitting.
Actually,
Astarte.
Yeah, that's another one.
So I said, this is a quote from Fritz Springmeyer. He says, one bloodline was in the Orient and developed Oriental magic. One lineage was from Canaan and the Canaanites. It had the name Astarte, then Astorga, then Astor, and then Astor.
It's definitely, I don't believe in coincidence, so I don't think that it could be a coincidence that it's that closely linked.
Yeah.
But it could be. That would be grasping at straws.
Astorga, though, like the only Astorgas I've known, isn't that a Latin name?
Astor or
Astorga?
Astorga? I don't know.
It would be Spanish, I would guess.
Spanish, yeah.
It's actually, yes, very Spain. It's Astorga. In fact, that's the name of a city in Spain, Astorga, Spain.
Ah, that'd be interesting. Can you tell? Is it on a river?
I don't know. Google Maps it is.
I know a lot of places are on rivers and waters because we need water. But
oh, yeah, there's rivers all over the place. Yeah, we use the enemy's tools against them and use Google Maps for our info.
And we use YouTube to send this out, and we use Facebook to talk about it.
So I actually wasn't able to find a whole lot of name changes officially out there, like I was saying about the marriages too, which is interesting, which leads me to believe that esoterically speaking, the word holds power, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to spell whatever. So they keep their name and they have to use it publicly in order for it to hold any kind of power or bearing. It's but
well, they also the majority of them left. The majority of them left the United States too. Went back to England.
The majority of the Astors?
Correct. Yes, the majority of the Astors. Just very few, and also it was mainly the intermarried women folk families that stayed. A lot of the males left. They own the London Times.
So they came over, they spread the seed, and then took off.
That's exactly what he did. Yes.
Interesting.
He was on a mission.
Probably very rightfully.
Yeah. So
also, when they're hiding, maybe they change their names over there. I don't, since we're not, over there, I guess we don't, per se know the famous names in London where we would probably know them better if they were, a lot of them stayed in the United States.
This is funny too, because some of the most famous Astors, and I guess this leads into the next question.
Do it.
You want to ask that?
I'll ask the question. What are some of the most famous Astors and their roles in history?
So we talked about John Jacob to death, I think. We could probably talk about him all night.
He's like the ultimate patriarch, but yeah, we got some others.
Right, but it's funny because one of the most famous is a female Astor, Caroline Schermerhorn, Astor. She was part of the famous Schermerhorn family in New York, and she was what you would call the how do I say this? The debutante style? She died.
Oh, the pre-Kardashian.
Right, the pre-Kardashian.
Right, but yeah, she was definitely a debutante for sure.
Famous
Socialite.
parties. Yeah.
What kind of parties? Very normal parties, I'm sure. Cupcakes.
Very normal.
No deer heads, no blood.
And you got to think
No
she
sex
was
magic.
during the Victorian period too, so it had to be crazy.
Seances and shit.
There's also a couple of actors that have Astor descent. One famous one, her name was Mary Astor. She was, I think, a 1920s, 1930s actress. As far as female famous ones, that's probably the highest of them.
What about Lady Nancy Astor? Did you already say that?
I didn't.
Yeah, she was the occultist, I believe, correct?
She's the first lady in British Parliament, the first female British parliamentarian.
Yeah, she was the first MP female.
Oh, right. Interesting.
Yeah.
We also,
so, I mean, super feminist. She supports women's rights. Everyone should love her.
love her to death, right?
To death.
One interesting one, John Jacob Jack Astor IV. He died on the Titanic.
Did you say Astor?
John Jacob Jack.
Yeah.
Oh,
They called him
sorry.
Jack.
Just call him ass. My bad.
But yeah, he died. He was the richest passenger aboard the RMS Titanic.
Huh. Oh, the Titanic. We should just do an episode on the Titanic. That shit is a clusterfuck of so many different conspiracies and
You got to wonder how much stuff actually died on that boat. How many secrets died with that boat? But we'll save that for that episode, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know how we always talk about families having to sacrifice?
Oh gosh.
I find it very odd that all those people, all the Illuminati had representatives on the Titanic. So you wonder if that was all those families, they sacrificed their super high end rich people. They weren't like, low end Astors. He was literally the richest Astor on the planet at the time. And he went down with the ship. So I look at it esoterically. To me, it looks like a big, huge sacrifice.
He was the patriarch.
Correct. Now, granted, it did serve in getting the Fed, because everybody that died pretty much everybody that died on the Titanic was also opposed to the Fed system in the United States.
Yeah.
Right. They were for the gold standard.
Correct.
But I mean, why not hit as many birds as you can, right? Like, take out the people, offer your sacrifices, take out the people who are against your plans, get money for your boat that had already gotten fucked up. It works on so many levels.
Plus, that entire event was foretold in a fiction novel too. So how about that?
Dude, is that one of them?
Yes.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it was written 14 years before it was written.
That's so fucked. And it was called the Titan.
Yes.
Yeah, the Titan.
Dude, and it was before the boat had even been created, right? Like, the boat wasn't even a thing yet.
Before the plans,
not a ship like that.
Before the plans were even like, yeah, that's fucked. Dude, that happened to another. There's a couple times in history where that's happened. Like, a book was written and then it basically came true.
It just goes to say, man, fiction, reality. I'm going to preach that all day long, dude.
We're all going to go insane together tonight.
Then there's the theory that it was a false flag and the Titanic really didn't sink. It's a twin ship because they made two.
Yes.
They made a twin, and there's a
quote unquote. Right.
Their conspiracy theory that they sunk the other one, and all those people are on an island with the clones, I guess. Just throwing out there.
Maybe that's the breakaway civilization. All
there
those
you go.
supposedly
Let's connect as many conspiracies to this as we can.
Well, and that's the point I wanted to make. Actually, we're doing this series on the Illuminati. It literally does connect to almost any conceivable conspiracy theory that you could come up with. You could tie it back to the Illuminati. Correct. Somehow or another.
It's true. It's true.
It's a huge interweaved. You can't even call it a rabbit hole. It's a
spider web.
Yeah. An intricate, multi-layered, 5-dimensional spider web. So we can also connect this to Ava Alice Muriel Astor. She's another one of the famous Astors. And she's the one maybe you were thinking of, Lee, who's super occultist and had maybe was one of the first people in the King Tutankhamun's whatever shit.
Oh,
yeah, no, I know about her. No, but Nancy Astor also behind the scenes was in the they controlled the women that were allowed, but she was aligned with several high-end men. And I can't, the names are escaping me. Who she's aligned with somebody extremely famous. I'll have to bring that up on a different episode.
Was it Aldous Huxley?
Oh yes, that's who it was. Yes.
Okay, so I thought that was Ava Ellis.
So that's who it is.
She had a king tut necklace, and she was super into like doing occult rituals, and she was best friends with Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, which was a plan for how to subjugate the masses.
That's who I'm thinking of. You are correct.
I want to back
doping us
up for a
up and
second
entertaining
here,
us endlessly and making us stupid.
I found the name of the lady that was accused and convicted of witchcraft, and I found her last name interesting because, and I don't want to spoil this, but so I won't. But I'll just say Lee was able to connect something back to Abraham Lincoln. So I'll let you go with that later. But the last name of the lady who became an Astor was Todd.
Okay, so the next thing we were going to talk about was bloodline or connections with other families or other bloodlines.
Yeah. So I don't want to steal Lee's thunder.
No, you don't know.
I'll let you go with that one, buddy, because I don't have any information.
Let it out, Lee.
Gotcha. Okay. The Fritz says that Abraham Lincoln, his father was a made-up character. That he was actually, his mother Mary Todd was actually came down to about 30 minutes from my house to a little town here called Lincolnton, which is a Rothschild owned, and their last names are Springs or Springmeyer, and that A. Springmeyer is actually Abraham Lincoln's father.
So wait, is Fritz Springmeyer related to Abraham Lincoln? Is that what we're saying?
He doesn't say that, but I've often wondered, why he never brings up his own lineage, his own name.
Is he in the fucking bloodline?
Well, he says that the Springmeyers changed their names to the Springs, and A. Springs and a bunch of families up here in North Carolina have the last name Springs, and that they are actually hidden Rothschild family lineage, and that A. Springs is really Abraham Lincoln's father.
Oh, that's not the first time we've heard that kind of conspiracy theory either. How many times can you hear the same kind of story over and over before you believe it?
Correct.
At least he wasn't born of immaculate conception.
And I believe Mary Todd is a Collins actually also. So the Todds were super occultists from Ireland, I believe, Scotland, somewhere. I believe it's Ireland. I think they were occultists from Ireland when they came over. Yeah. So and I'm pretty sure they intermarried with the Collins and the Rothschilds. The Todds did.
Man. They're just so incestuous. Okay, what about the Black House connection? Did either of you hit on that?
I did not.
I don't know. I just saw the name, but I don't know anything about it.
I had like 5, full-length tomes I could read on this one family. And if you look at the family tree, it just goes on and on and on.
Are you saying Black House or Back House? Black
House.
Okay, I don't know. The Back House is their other name, but I don't know about Black House.
Huh? The Back House is whose other name?
That's the Astor's other name.
Oh, so that's the other question we were on, right on. Backhouse?
Yeah, Backhouse. George Backhouse Astor. He comes from the brother, his half brother's Backhouse.
Maybe I read it wrong.
William Backhouse Astor, Senior and Junior. Wow. And that's a major American businessman there. And they're millionaires in their own right.
Yeah. And also Waldorf came from Germany, Waldorf where they came from. So they were actually the Waldorf Astoria. They were, they didn't talk about it. They were also intermarried, but they acted like they weren't.
Right. Well, they were, something I read said they were cousins.
Correct.
And then they were actually, not
that's what I'm saying.
So they're right. Yeah. So crazy.
But supposedly that was only over business, over the Waldorf and then the Astoria brothers. That was why they kind of were at odds. But then they ended up, I believe, marrying back into each other. And so you have Waldorf Astoria blood also. Waldorf Astor, I should say. Yeah.
You got to spread the shit out, guys. This is why we get the Queen having like retarded siblings stuck in. Sorry, my bad.
Wow.
What about Brevort?
What is it?
Brevort? I don't know how to pronounce shit.
Oh, yeah.
Brevoort.
Brevort.
I missed that one.
Okay. Well, any other intermarriages or connections to other families or other bloodlines?
Oh, huge. Like I said, if you go look at their official family tree, and all of the people that they married and intermingled with. It basically reads like a who's who of the 18th century, the up to the 1800s.
FDR, the Delanos were related to them.
Yeah, you got the Winthrops, Hubert Winthrop Chancellor, so the entire Winthrop bloodline. There was another big one that I saw a minute ago. The Rands bloodline,
like Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
My
gosh, where's the rest of these? There's so many. It's ridiculous.
But so Ayn Rand would be kind of breaking step with them, right? Because she was a promoter of like self-reliance and libertarianism, and they're all about methods of control.
You could say that, but think about people like, and I don't want to speak ill of people, conspiracy theorists, but look at people like Laura Eisenhower. So she stepped out, right? But we also know that COINTELPRO is a real thing.
Well, remember also they balance their good with their bad in their religion, so to speak. So the super good, you have to understand just by default that most likely their bad is just as on the other side as their good. Like look at Bill Gates. He has the #1 foundation in the world, help philanthropist, but he also goes to India and inoculates and does all this stuff and sterilizes people and works on eugenics. So so by saying just because you see like Ian Rand's bunch of good stuff on this side, that doesn't mean in the background she didn't do something just as bad to offset her good, because that's what they consent, which you always talk about.
Oh wow! So is it possible that this whole thing, all these families could be practicing what we talked about last night on Breaking Basic? You got half of them practicing like right hand path shit, and half of them practicing left hand path shit.
To oppose each other. Yeah, that goes along with the other thing I always talk about consent, meaning it doesn't matter what you think about it. They just have to do what they call good. Like, I'm sorry that we stole your baby and killed it, but we told you we were going to do it to begin with. So that was on you for not keeping us from doing that.
Wow.
Sneaky fucking bastards. I don't believe that that's actually true when you come down to it. I just think they think it's true and they've gotten away with it for a while.
Oh, no, I agree with you. But I always tell people that's what they think. That's not
right.
what I think.
I got you.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the most egotistical person is the one who says that they broke their own ego. So, and how do you do that? You think you have no ego by being completely selfless. Meanwhile, all of your selfless acts are doing nothing but feeding your ego. So, oh Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are some of the control mechanisms that they currently have going on? Because they're still powerful. This is not like an ancient thing. It is an ancient thing, and it's still going today.
Well, officially, the story is that they have been on the decline. This particular family has been on the decline for years. I don't know if I believe that, because I feel like they probably go through. I'm going to draw this into fiction. What's that movie about the vampires, where every few years one wakes up and takes over the clans? Underworld.
Underworld, yeah.
Right. So I kind of feel like it's probably one family takes control of the entire thing for a cycle type thing. Maybe, I don't know, that's a theory, because you see these families come in ebbs and flows. The Astors were in control in the early 1900s. Now you've got the Rothschilds.
Well, first of all, their outward kind of, their name may be declined, but like I said, they still own the London Times. Okay,
right.
That's the #1 publication in all of the world. So they're still controlling data. They're controlling news. They're controlling what literally everybody in Europe sees. And the London Times affects the New York Times. So it's just the right hand feeding the left hand there. Because Carlos, what's his name, owns the New York Times, and then the Astors own the London Times.
So I've got a list of things that they've owned historically that reads like a who's who. So one of them was the director of the American Express Company, director of the Atlantic Fruit and Sugar Company, director of Chase Manhattan Bank of the Rockefellers, director of City and Suburban Homes Company, which was a big deal way back when, original classical cinematograph corporation, which provided the original stuff to Hollywood, right? Cuban Dominican Sugar Company, which, sugar used to be enormous, right? Still is, I guess. The Great Northern Railroad, which we know how and they own Illinois Railroad. We know how important that was to the founding of this, to making America what it is, quote unquote, today. Several banks, too many to list. publications, Western Union Telegraph.
Right.
So,
So I don't believe that they still don't have their fingers in all of that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, they just not the kind of family that's on the top, on the outward. Like I said, like the Rockefellers.
Mhm.
They want, you know, for whatever reason, their family gets, like you say, gets. They must have been elected to be the face of
Right.
the quote unquote.
I think it's probably a lot more incestuous now. I think this may have been the beginnings of, because this is when we really started seeing American currency, the U.S. dollar, gaining what it eventually became, right? And now we see it as a sort of pseudo global currency. You know, there's fight for control over that all the time, sure, but and I'm going to an article that I shared the other day, whereby a university in Switzerland or Zurich was able to do a study, and they wrote some kind of program to try and link how all of these different big financial corporations and chemical corporations and all this stuff all across the world, all tied together, ends up being owned by a very tiny subset of people, ran through 147 different subsidiaries that has fingers in everything. So,
Talk about the octopus, right? You've got like the head, and then you've got all the tentacles, and the tentacles are quite long.
right.
And they have all the little suction cups on each tentacle.
You've got this very small group of families that probably own every one of those 147 subsidiaries that are giving money and taking money, and it's
And
They
look
all
at-
sit on each other's boards.
And they all sit on
each other's boards.
Yeah.
Well, and Steve just pointed out, like, who's to say that they haven't had a series of name changes and still own all this shit that we don't know about? Or like Lee was saying earlier, they have proxies that do it for them. But you also look at like if you cluster up all that shit that Claude just listed, and all the shit that they have their fingers in, it's the same with any story of control. Like they control religion, they control. There's even shit on there that was like law enforcement or whatever, military, education, and communications.
Well, it's the holding companies too. You know, we never will know because the holding companies don't have to have any names because they're their own entity.
Wait, what's a holding company? I'm like, yeah, totally. Yep.
No, a holding company is the company that let's say me and you and Claude all own our huge business. We're open. Like people can come sue us, people can come attack us for things we do personally. But if the holding company owns it, it's protected by an umbrella. So you have to pierce the holding company to get any money out of them.
Right. That's like the term tax shelter. That's why people use tax shelters, right?
Right.
Correct. I'm gonna get a holding company for my business. So I
can.
Good idea.
You can. It's just super expensive.
Fuck.
It's super expensive to run one of those because you have to have a CFO, a CEO. You know, everybody has to do their job, and you can't hold both titles because then somebody can come sue you for misappropriation. So it's a the people that own all the money, they control all the money, so they make all the rules.
Such a stupid fucking game.
Well, and I tell you what, they revealed their intent to us with the game Monopoly, didn't they?
That's right. Told us the whole way it works right there in the board game.
Oh, I thought it was interesting too. This has come up on a different show about evolution and micro versus macro, and they the Astors control the Zoological Society. They're the advisors of it or something in the Museum of Natural History somewhere in the National Institute of Social Sciences, and all of those promote evolution theory, macro evolution theory.
Right.
I tell you what, if you could control the narrative about where we came from, we'll never ask where they came from.
Well, look, if you look at history, evolution started at the same time global warming started, same time eugenics started, same time weather modification started. You know, I don't believe in coincidences. What does that tell you? You know,
we're calling this a historical society, and we often talk about how the historical record has been altered. Right. So if you have these people completely controlling the historical record, and through all their publishing companies and holdings that they have, they're probably publishing school books, they're publishing history books, and all of this stuff.
What was Aldous Huxley's dad's name?
Oh shit.
I'll find it.
Mr. Huxley.
Okay. Charles Darwin and Huxley's dads were best friends.
Wasn't it Alistair?
Alistair, yeah. I think
Alistair
you're right.
Huxley.
But they were.
Go ahead. Leonard Huxley looks like, I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
No, maybe it is Aldous. Maybe I'm wrong, man. Maybe it is Aldous that was best friends with Charles Darwin, and he wrote his foreword. Yes, absolutely.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. The Darwinism, like I said, evolution. It was all concocted in the same time period of existence.
Oh,
All
that's funny.
formed.
Even when you look it up on Google, you get all of these, the House of Smith Elder, blah, 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 all these different books, Thomas Huxley, Thoughts on Education, chosen from the writings of Matthew Arnold. And then at the end, you have Charles Darwin, 1921.
See, it's people think we're crazy, but it aligns up. I mean,
And it's funny
propaganda.
that all you got to do is a simple Google search and find this.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. So we touched on Astoria, that it's the first permanent American settlement west of the Rockies and is founded by Astors with their fur trading and trapping days. Is there anything else we want to bring up about Astoria?
American territorial claims in the region.
I mean, I know there's just a lot of satanic activity connected with it, but a lot of it is treated like hearsay, just like a lot of satanic ritual abuses, just kind of passed off. And those people are crazy, or there's like therapists planting it in their minds, or whatever.
So you're from that part of the world up there. Mm-hmm. Is there?
I've been to Astoria.
So when you think about Astoria and you think about those different places, like we were talking about earlier with energetic areas, what's in that area? What's
oh my god, it's depressing as fuck. It's right on the Columbia, and it's like literally like the Columbia River meets the ocean, and Astoria is right there. So it's like on the ocean, on the river. And Columbia is a huge river. It's I don't know if it is the biggest in the United States, but it should be. It's gigantic.
You could take it the Michael Wan direction into some sort of river god worship, right?
I'm guessing. I mean, it's a handy place to be. Like if you're a skeptic, you can just say, well, that's of course where you would go because you can easily ship from there, right? You can ship up inwards, inland, up into Canada, even where you're getting a lot of the furs, and you can ship out in the ocean. So there's a good, just realistic reason to be there. But it definitely, and I'm a energetically sensitive person. And when I go to Astoria, like it's a creepy, weird place. The Goonies was filmed there partially.
Right.
It has an eerie feeling to it. And I don't think that that's just happenstance. There's also like, there's like
a lot of weird human trafficking shit happened there too, right?
Human trafficking?
Oh, well, back in the day, you've got the stories about up around Seattle, that area underneath Seattle, there's crypts and tombs and shit under there where they would trap people and ship them off down the river. Yeah, there's just a bunch of crazy, weird history involved with that too. I mean, it's in that same general area. But we could also look at this from a more exoteric level and say, all right, so you've got John Jacob Astor. He basically takes over the West Coast at that point, and then later on owns all the railroad companies that are building the connection to the West Coast from the East Coast, and builds their fortunes on top of that.
Yeah, very monopolistic.
Yeah.
Just dropping those seeds and then taking off. Sorry. Huh. Did you guys find any other locations that were important in the Astors story?
Italy, Germany, Switzerland, England. I think they've been just about everywhere. They're probably involved in just about every form of government in most major nations.
Yeah. It really tells you a lot when you look at like all the different families, all the shit they have their fingers in, and the fact that they're everywhere in the world all throughout history.
You couldn't write a book this tied together, right? It would end up being like a 12 novel version of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, for sure. So then what seems to be the Astor role overall in the power pyramid? Because like I like this concept that on the back of the dollar bill there's the pyramid, there's the 13 levels of it, right? And so each family is like one of those levels. Like where would you guys put Astor if you had to pick one, or like what do you think their overall role is in general in that pyramid?
I think it would be fun to be able to do some sort of gematria type stuff on the names of the families.
That's a really good idea,
right? Just find out where they, because we know that in the star, I want to call it the Star of David, but it's got another name. Each letter sits in the star, and each one has a numerical value. You could probably kind of line the families out if you did that. But the Astors, I kind of feel like, at least for the time from John Jacob up through the 1920s, it was pretty clear that his role was expansion, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's also, like I said, their family. They're known as one of the more uh, Satanistic. They're one of the bigger families in that regard as far as Satanism. They have lots of stuff tied into that. Not even just a cult, but actual Satanism.
Yeah, like magic, dark magic,
Dark
dark
magic,
black
correct.
magic shit.
Correct.
I did find a quote about them being very prominent members in Britain's equivalent to Skull and Bones. And I'm trying to find the name of that order of something.
Yes, correct. Yes,
And they're also like too. Dark sex magic bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, they were tied in with the Todds, who, like I said, were, Astors, Todds, Collins were all up in the Salem area. So, and in Germany, like I said, in Europe before they came over here.
It makes me think like all the people who were killed as witches were probably like the healers and the folk medicine people, and like the, I don't know, like just mystics and stuff. And then the people who didn't get killed were like the dark magic Satanist bitches.
Maybe I would say that I told you earlier I was going to bring up something that I've been reading a little bit into regarding druids and stuff, and I know we'll probably touch on this a lot more in the Collins O'Coylan's episode. But when you think about that term of that type of healer, like shaman type healer you're talking about, the picture of that we get in our minds is of druids, from Celtic lore, but those guys were actually horrible, horrible people, blood cultists. The way that they're divining, they didn't use runes or tarot cards. They would stab a dude in the chest and read the future based on the way his blood spurted
out. Yeah. So, blood pattern experts.
And it's funny because you look at, you read what Julius Caesar wrote about the Druids, and he was not kind to them at all. And people think that he was kind of being mean, about what he was writing, like propaganda, because he was fighting a war against the Celtic culture at that point. But maybe he wasn't, because we have other stories even later on that say, well, these Druid guys, they're freaking evil, right? Yeah. And then we know that there are families that are directly related to those Druid bloodlines. And we know, was it Emperor Claudius? He signed a decree outlining Druidism. And then a few years later, here comes Augustus, and he's got Druids sitting in his royal court, right? And we all know what became of the Roman Empire after that point.
After that, yeah.
So
done passed it down.
Crumble and burn.
Yeah. We're talking about co-opting. It could be a huge co-opt job.
It slid in for sure.
Yeah, and it could be. We also know. So if you talk about the witches that were burned, like in Salem, and it was all over the place back then. The Puritans burning people for witchcraft, or even being accused of witchcraft. That could all be ritual stuff, because we know they do ritual stuff nowadays.
Right. Sure. If you ever, you can delve into that. There's a theory that says that it was all the Puritans were actually the Satanists.
What?
Well, we know that they were pretty fucking evil.
Like the history's been rewritten, and we just think of them that way, or like that was actually because they're like the most anti-satanic people in the history of the world.
No, we'll do an episode. I'll get with you. We'll do an episode on the Puritans, and I promise you, I can bring up evidence that says contrary to that.
Because I'm just saying, like what you can look at and see, they were like always warning against Satan, and like
Remember what I told you, left hand, right hand. What you saw on one side, if you believe what they believe, the complete opposite was just as dark as this side was good.
Well, they seem like dark motherfuckers.
There's an equal and opposite reaction.
That's
for
right.
Sure. So, you've got these Puritan guys. They're holding their congregation to these crazy, absurd standards, right? Wearing long black dresses, whatever it is. And they're not holding themselves to the same standards, because we know that, they were lushes and probably pedophiles. And
but clergy are never like that.
Well, I was just getting ready to say, let's look at the clergy, now. It kind of, cut off your nose and spite your face. Of course they're married to Jesus, and they're, sticking lighters out in little girls in the convent,
Jesus, fuck.
That doesn't mean that the congregation was that way. In fact, they wouldn't want their congregations to be that way, right?
Right.
They want them to be pure, right? And why? Well, to even out their evil deeds.
Spirits. That's right. Correct.
Or just to get them to work and, produce the food and the tools and the whatever goods.
For sure, that's too, right? For sure, that too.
Yeah, that's true. Esoteric and esoteric. So there's definitely keys to both sides.
True.
As above, so below.
We're a bunch of slaves. All right.
I'm not a slave.
I'm not a
Get
slave.
up, slave.
Oh, we're slaves. We're just woke slaves. That's all.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Gotta
We're
keep
using
us on the
YouTube right now.
plantation.
And Lee is happy about it. All right, so where are we at here? Oh, I liked all this stuff about, I didn't like it, but it's interesting that they had these hands in all of these creating more palatable versions of satanic systems. So like they've created all of these different secret society sort of things and organizations that when you're entering into them and you're kind of taking part in them, you don't realize that you're getting into Satanism.
That is huge. Look at Freemason. What's the first thing a Freemason will tell you, Lee?
There you go. I was just getting ready to say that's the Freemason. You have 0 to 32, and that's looks all good. 33 and above is not what you signed up for.
I've heard a story about that actually, where they'll ask you a question when you get to 32, right? At some point in the process, and some Freemason will probably out there say I'm full of shit, but apparently they'll ask you a question, and depending on how you answer that question, you'll remain a 32, but be given a different title and be put in charge of like some charity of some kind. But if you answer it the other way, then their secrets are revealed to you.
They'll give you a baby to eat.
They ask you about Christ, and if you love Christ, you get one answer, and if you're actually the blood of Christ, it's another answer.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. It has to, like the crux is Jesus.
Correct. Yeah, and you have Masons and Freemasons too. So you have Scottish Rite, and you have all these different. The Astors come from the Scottish Rite too, which tells you one thing. So, which is the most powerful of all the Masons is the Scottish Rite, because and like I said, it's outward. It's left hand, right hand as being Christian, but like Paul is saying, when you cross upwards, I would say, when you ascend, then you're in the 33rd, then you actually are not for Jesus anymore. You're actually ascending him, I guess, and above him.
Right, and you just go read Albert Pike's writings, and you'll see the truth of that. So, and then you can look at who was a famous Freemason. You got, and you and I have argued a little bit about this, Lee, about Aleister Crowley later on in the 20s up to the 30s, and even his younger life. But he was accepted into almost every single branch of Freemasonry. He was getting letters in the mail giving him rights and titles at the end of it. And I have to wonder. So he's got Thelema, we got the Ordo Templi Orientis, we've got the Rosicrucians, we've got these not really Freemasonry affiliated groups like that, the Golden Dawn Society, the Theosophical Society in America, and later on you've got Church of Wicca, whatever, that was actually based on Aleister Crowley's writings and then whitewashed. And then you've got, I don't know, it goes nuts. Today you've got Chaos Magic.
All of this back to Aleister Crowley, or what is this all connected to? Sorry.
Well, it connects I'm going somewhere with it. So you've got this guy that kind of blasted off, and you can even say that he had an effect on Scientology, a very, very close effect on Scientology.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, but what does that do? So now you've got an entire branch of these Hermetic style teachings, these very philanthropic organizations, which is wrapped up under the name Freemasonry. Then you've got this other side that's very dark and it's got bad connotations to it. And it's no longer considered faux pas, especially today in 2018, to do these things, to research this stuff. Back in the 1700s, I would have been burned at the stake for the stuff I talk about, right?
Correct.
But now I don't have a problem talking about it because they want it out there. Suddenly it all became available again. I consider what's on the internet now the modern day Library of Alexandria because of all the information that's available.
Correct.
Right? And why is that? They're evening it out. So I'm wondering if we went through some sort of cycle of one side being in control, and now we're kind of evening it out again, and then it's going to dip back, or they want it to dip back over to the other side.
Or it's a big circle. It's just going in a big circle.
Yeah.
I think the crux of all of that is control, and that whatever the most true and profound level of truth is going to be the most hidden from us in either side of those things. that make sense?
It does. They're controlling the
Like,
narrative on all of it, right?
Yeah, and you buying it, not you, but like people buying into that and taking part in either side of those things is going to be you're going to be missing out on what's actually going on and what the actual truth is if you're doing that. They're both controlled.
The scary part is they're letting this out. What's happening next that we don't know about?
Yeah,
Because all the stuff we know, they didn't know back then. That was the mystery school knowledge. That was all the knowledge that was completely hidden. Well, we know what we know now. What's the next step that we don't know now? Don't know about?
I have this feeling like as many people as they can get to like directly choose, because like I was saying, I don't think, and I think they're starting to realize, or maybe they've always known, that like this implied consent bullshit isn't real. You can't just like have someone skip through the fucking little screen that says I accept when you're doing any app, and it's like 25 pages of shit, and one of it says I sold my soul to Satan or something. Like, you can't pull that shit. It's not fair. But so
they do, though. But they do.
Can you not?
Well, no. But I'm saying, like, on a spiritual level, I think they're realizing you can't really do that, and so they're trying to get as many people as possible to openly choose that side, like through transhumanism and through all this like super heavy pushing of like really dark themes in the world.
Except they want us all dead. Let's be honest.
But before you die,
what you're saying would be true if they didn't want to kill 4/5 of the planet anyway.
I guess it doesn't
matter. That does not matter whether you care or not. It does not. Zero matter to them. It does not matter, because they just decide to drop a nuke on us, and then what? Or they decide to taint the water supply. Then what?
Good point.
Or, so I'm one of those that still think that your consent makes zero to them. Because there's no way it could, because of everything they're doing.
Maybe when what was that episode we were talking about when like the time like the Yugas are gonna come to a point where like it's almost like this portal fucking thing, and like you can't only get out if you
think about the type of, if they want people doing dark shit in their daily lives, and they want people zoned out and turned into zombies and all this fun stuff like Lee was saying, that's a certain type of energy. You've got people in a certain frame of mind. They're looking at porn all the time. They're watching murder shows on TV all the time. They're stuck in traffic every day. That's gearing people up for a certain form of that energy that you're talking about in that cycle. So you almost like a moth in a cocoon becoming a moth, right?
Yeah.
Training. Yeah, it's training in my opinion. They're training people. They're training because it's just like, let's look at our privacy. Back in the 50s, if somebody called you on the phone and asked for your driver's license, social security number, you try to find them and shoot them. That stuff was guarded. Hell, when you go on the internet now and they're like, sign up for some free app, what do? You just throw all your info out there, right? So think about how far we've gone in just that instance, in that example, from in the last, 40, 50 years.
Oh gosh, I remember my grandpa in the 80s. It took him forever to even just want to get a telephone in the house.
Right.
And that's from that old school thinking. So you wipe out that old school thinking, and it's more acceptance, more desensitization, becoming desensitized to these new technologies and these new privacy now is becoming next to nothing. You've got, kids on apps like TikTok and YouTube sharing their intimate details of their everyday personal lives with the world. To the second. Yeah. Their privacy is becoming next to nothing. And obviously Facebook. Oh yeah, and it's becoming Instagram, the big one. What does it do when you share your life like that? All that's doing is feeding ego, right? And it does it in a sort of a threefold way, because it feeds your own ego, putting your own stuff out there. You want people to like your stuff, and then you got trolls that'll come in, feeding their own ego by making fun of you for what you shared.
So maybe you got people that maybe want to be like you, and then their fucking ego is growing because they're like, I want to be like that.
NPCs, it's meme theory, baby.
But so I feel like this is some level of this whole realm is some level of like a trap or an illusion, like simulation theory style or worse. And that if there's going to be a chance to escape it, the further you are locked into this bullshit, the harder it's going to be.
It'll be like trying to break. I'll talk about a thing that I read the other day about.
You drinking wine, buddy?
I am.
You finished it, I think.
That's the end of it.
I told you.
I'm a lush. Shut up. Shut up. Shutting up. So I think I actually shared this article, but they were talking about kids that become addicted to video games and what it does to their perception of reality. They spend hours and hours and hours and hours, looking at World of Warcraft or whatever it is, and then they have to go through this addiction counseling for that because that's all they want to do. And they're talking about it. It's just mind blowing because they're talking about when they're looking at the world around them, they're seeing it pixelated like it's in a video game, and that's what their mind is doing to them. And they're even assigning values to things like that ladder that's sitting over there. I would, if I look at it, I see the word ladder above it like I would in a video game. So,
Right.
Wait, their brain is doing that? 'Cause there was a period of time where I played so much Assassin's Creed that I would look around and be like, I just climb up that, and then I jump onto that, and then I could run over, jump down. Like I was like planning my moves through the 3-dimensional world as though I was.
Oh God, and we're even seeing that in culture now with parkour, right? I'm just saying.
Well, look, one of the things about MMORPGs is you actually assign your psyche, yourself to your character on WoW, on World of Warcraft.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you're not just having a warlock. That's you. So when a horde comes and kills you, it literally for a millisecond hurts you because he killed your tune. That is a real thing. If you talk to people that are real, like way more into it than even us, that's literally they perceive the game. They don't have an out. Like what Claude's talking about outside. Those people are so in depth. There is no outside world.
I've been in that kind of trance before, Lee. I remember playing Ultima Online back in the day, and I was so into it. And I was doing PvP or whatever, and it's real twitchy and fast. And every time I would die, I would get that little jolt. I guess it's dopamine or something hitting, and I'm like into it. And I guess that is good too, because what's one of the methods of mind control? You're creating a Manchurian candidate. You want to give them that. You want to train their bodies to receive a jolt of dopamine from a certain experience, and they're going to want to do that type of experience again to get that same dopamine shot over and over and over.
To me, it's just a modern version of the counterculture back in the 60s. That's how they controlled those people, was through tune in, tune out, drop, drugs, yada yada yada. Now everything is digitalized. Like my 7-year-old grandson, his world is over if he doesn't have a phone, an iPad, an Xbox, or YouTube. Literally, he has no clue what to do in life.
I told you I grounded my son from everything, right? For weeks. He doesn't know when he's getting it all back. The first few days, dude, it was hell on earth. Hell on earth. I'm telling you. Now is
it super good now though?
Yeah, he's a different kid. He's like, he doesn't care. I caught him reading a book when he was here last time, and it's so. I guess maybe if you're not that indoctrinated, it's easier to pull. It's like being addicted to anything.
And imagine nobody doing that for you from 2 to 18, or 2 to 25. It's got to be infinitely worse without somebody pulling the plug for you.
And how many kids like that in modern day society are going to be that way?
All of them. It's like almost 100%, except the children of the fucking Astors and the elite, because they know better and they say it too. They won't give their kids this shit because it's
that's one of the big things that Bill Gates talks about. That
he doesn't inoculate his own children.
Yeah,
Steve Jobs did too before he died.
Yeah,
they don't inoculate their own kids.
They don't vaccinate their kids, and they don't give them fucking electronics. It shows you something. I bet you those bitches don't drink city water. Like,
no.
Wow. And draw this back to what we were talking about the Puritans a few minutes ago. You had the priest telling people what to do down here, and they're doing this stuff, and he's doing something different. So
exactly correct. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
They're like, don't have sex, but I'm gonna go fuck your kid in the back room.
Exactly. Wow. So we have all these people that are becoming so basically they're being raised with zero social skills, right?
Exactly.
And that's why you see the meme of, in fact, I think Brett Saylors just shared it, of the person sleeping in the bed with TV fuzz for his dream. Yeah, no thoughts, no inner thought, because when you're playing a game like that, and I've even been sucked into books that way, where the book is all I think about, right? And I can't wait to go back and finish the novel, read two. It's right, and it happens a lot. But you have these on rails video games, right? The story's completely laid out for you, and you do the same thing over and over and over and over. It completely desensitizes you, takes all your socialization skills away. By the time you get to be 18, like you were saying, Lee, you've got a zombie. You've got a person who can't interact with anyone else. You've got a person who doesn't really know the difference between good and evil, because they murder people all day long in video games. It's a you're building candidates.
Whether it makes you what you said, the thing I think it just makes you desensitized to it. Same thing TV does. All the mass shootings do. I don't think it makes a person be a killer, but at the same time, I know absolutely fact it makes you not care. Oh yeah, I saw that yesterday. I saw this yesterday. It doesn't. That's why that's why video games were even invented, was the U.S. military.
It's true.
Because they after World War One, I think the fireback rate dropped down to 61%. By Vietnam, it was back to like 92% or something. 87% of American soldiers
kill or die.
You're talking about how people would not shoot people on purpose, and we learned that. And so you're saying that they made the video game training to get that.
That's exactly where
people on purpose again.
Correct. Yeah, that's fact. That's not me conspiracy. That literally is fact. The military industrial complex, everything we get, they've already used it, so to speak, and that's one that's provable. But that's one of the ways besides the brainwashing and everything else they do to you in basic, but that's what actually got the fireback rate to where nobody else in the world is even close to us, even now, not even close.
Yeah, and it's chaos too. I read
military industrial complex on Veterans Day, you heathen.
You know what? I'll let him do it. I had that basic training indoctrination, and I can tell you that's exactly what it is. By the time I got out of basic training, I felt like a robot. I really did.
Balls to ass, right?
Yeah, and they talk about people that can't hack it and they get kicked out of basic training. They failed the program, right? Literally, it's in. They're saying what happened.
Well, and then they're in some file somewhere as like, this person's going to be trouble later. Let's keep an eye on them.
Right. Well, remember, we talk about the eugenicists. They understand that 10% of the world is useless, and if you can't get in the military, you fell out. You're literally in that 10%.
So are we considered the fail outs, the 10%, because we're able to see what this stuff is doing to people?
Oh, obviously, yeah. You would be in the unprogrammable, like the Weather Underground. When they interviewed the guy, he said, "Well, they ended up having just murdered 20 million Americans because we couldn't change their mind. If they were to turn the U.S. into a socialist camp type situation, they would have to kill, I think, 20 or 25 million people because those were the people that were quote unquote unprogrammable or unchangeable to the system."
Such a good program. Let's do it. It's so fucked.
Well, it's good for them, right? Because it goes straight into their agenda of they don't want to lose control. They've spent centuries building this up to where it's at now, and we know it's been centuries. According to their historical record, we had damn near 1,000 years where people weren't even allowed to learn.
Correct. Yes, exactly.
The only people that were allowed to have books was the church, the clergy. So
right, you were allowed to dig in the dirt. You weren't even allowed to, hunt animals even.
Reminds me of Monty Python.
As well it should. I'm being oppressed.
You're just packing mud in a field.
I'm being oppressed.
We have too much fun. All right, let's talk about I also wanted to point out when we were talking about the Astors' role overall, we're talking about expansion and some other things, but I also read that they had something to do with China becoming communist. And we know the communist socialist agenda is actually one of control, not helping poor people. They had something to do with arranging the Pearl Harbor attack, and they had something to do with getting Hitler into power in Germany.
Well, remember, FDR was a Delano. Delanos are Astors. Okay. So, and FDR is also a 33rd degree Mason. So if you want to look at esoterically, some people say Pearl Harbor was the military-industrial complex's sacrifice. Esoterically, so everything has to be sacrificed. So the Masons understand that. The Masons rule the world. So what do? So they just move the aircraft carriers and stuff they couldn't replace, and they allowed the Japanese to. They baited them into the war, actually.
Yeah. So and they knew it was coming. They arranged it.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, what I mean by that is that how they got them to do it was by cutting off the oil. So Japan had no choice. Japan had to come do it. And we actually, before the war, we actually gave them, there's papers that say we gave them the plan by showing our weaknesses. So we actually gave them the ability to do it. We cut off their oil supply, and then FDR just made all the high-end generals just turn a blind eye. because the Norwegians told the commander, the naval commander, look, they're coming, and the guy said, okay, we got it. He's like, no, you don't understand. He goes, no, you don't understand. Don't call anybody else. We got this. And there's actual FOIA where you can, the Norwegians supposed to have, not the U.S., but the Norwegians supposedly have a FOIA request that shows the transcript where he was telling the head of the Pacific whatever that the Japanese were coming.
They don't teach that in high school history.
No, they surely did not.
Well, there's that actually works for almost the entire Axis, though, Lee, because there's when you start looking into non-mainstream history, there's a very similar story with Nazi Germany, how they had completely broken away from centralized banking and all this other stuff, and they didn't have a choice but to get into the war. And so who's going to be their most natural ally, right? These other countries that are in the same situation against globalist powers.
Well, they invented Hitler, so what? Right. So it's all a big scam, right?
Right.
I mean, they brought Hitler into power. The Astors, the Rockefellers, Henry Ford. They supplied the Nazi Party.
To what end? To what end?
So
there's no.
Well, to what end? It has no rhyme or reason.
What? Say that again. You broke up.
To what end did they do that then? Because it would seem.
Why? The Rockefeller. I mean, the Rothschild.
Right. Well, no, I understand that, but why? Why put Hitler into power if he's just going to seemingly betray the people that put him into power?
Who did he betray, though? Let's think.
Yeah.
Who did you're told he betrayed, but who did he betray?
Right.
Okay, that's the way we have to look at it. If we're going to go tinfoil, we have to go.
You go all the way or not at all, buddy.
I mean, so if you believe that the Rothschilds, Waterloo, if you understand the story that they gave England the loan for $300 million, and then their courier came back and told a lie to England that Napoleon won the war, so they sold all their stocks to Rothschild for 1 or 2 cents on the dollar. But it was completely the opposite. So he turned around and sold it back to him again for $300 million, and that's where they got their $500 trillion. If you translate it into world money today, that's the story anyway. So if they're supplying France and England, then how can you not extrapolate that they didn't supply America, the Axis, and the Allies? Because they're selling bullets and everything the same. Henry Ford sold the trucks to the Axis, right? Mm-hmm. And Rockefeller gave them their oil to run the trucks, right? Standard Oil.
Yeah, that's all connected. You've got and look at the companies that were quote unquote Nazi companies back then, like Volkswagen, Lufthansa, all these different ones, and now they're worldwide companies. They didn't go away when the rest of the Nazis did.
And we got all that research, all those practices that they learned how to perfect during that time.
All the rubber plants and all the factories in Germany, guess how many of them got bombed?
0.
One. No, one, and they got $25 million for that bombing.
Just for show.
Which translates to about $2.5 billion, right?
And then you've got the conspiracy theory also about the little man bomb parts. When they were the theory is that they were intercepted on one of the last U-boats, and so the parts, which was the fast lighting fuse, because the scientists in Alamogordo, they couldn't figure out a fusing mechanism to actually set the bomb off. So the theory is that this U-boat that ended up showing up had Japanese guys on board. They ended up killing themselves, and we confiscated these parts from German scientists that were trying to escape. And so we got the lighting, the fuse for the nuclear bomb for Little Man, and that's what was ended up being used to drop on Japan to end the war with them.
Okay, so the real tinfoil, even ahead of that, wasn't an accident. That was actually, that's how Hitler got out and the Spider got out of Germany. Right. Was they traded the uranium because once again, I'll get in trouble for saying it, but one of the theories is it wasn't concentration camps, it was work camps, and what they were actually doing was using the slave labor in the power plants to create the uranium. We couldn't do it with free work labor here, but they could get it done in Germany Because if you look at the power consumption, they said from back then around Auschwitz, around all the camps, was 500,000 times more power generated than anywhere else in the world.
And let's see why. So I'm gonna take this really tinfoil real quick. So you have the theory of the Nazi bell, right? You know about the
Correct.
Nazi
Oh, yeah.
bell.
Oh,
So
flying saucer / occult portal opener.
right. So it wasn't a saucer. It was actually underground. And from the accounts of it, it was some sort of generator that would
the shape of a bell.
Right, in the shape of a bell, and it had these wires coming down into it, and it would use more electricity than anything else that could be generated at that time, but ended up producing more than it was given. So basically, it was sort of a free energy generator, free energy device. But the theory is that it was some sort of time device as well.
It levitated.
Right. So I kind of feel like we could almost take this into a Mandela effect situation and say, was that the beginnings of what we now call CERN, right?
Well, you have the real wackos that talk when they talk about Hitler down in Argentina. That's also they gave the Allies everything but the bell, and that the bell went with him to Argentina, and that's where they continued the research. What you're talking about, which would be modern day CERN. Yeah.
Interesting.
And then we also, as Brett pointed out, got Israel created out of the deal. So
the Balfour document.
Absolutely.
Yep. That was the Rothschilds. That's how they got in the war. They said, okay, we'll get America in the war, but you're going to give us Israel. And that's what the Balfour Declaration really was about.
I would assume that would have been planned, though, Lee. I would assume that would have been planned because FDR himself said that anything that happens politically, you can guarantee it's not an accident. That's a direct quote from FDR.
I have to say that Steve asked a really good question, which is whether or not the generator runs on adrenochrome and rape tears.
I wouldn't doubt it. Damn it. That's a good question. We know their affinity for adrenochrome and rape tears, don't we, bastards?
I can't believe we can even laugh about that. That is how fucked up. That's how much shit we've seen and heard.
Speaking of being desensitized, right? Holy shit!
Yeah, exactly. But I totally agree with you, Claude. It was definitely pre-planned. There's no doubt. It had to be. If he was the 33rd degree Mason and he ties all this Illuminati stuff, obviously it was all part of the plan. He probably just got a memo and was told what to do, what to say.
Yeah.
I gotta ask. So I've had this kind of floating around in my head for a while that World War I was a sort of test bed for humanity's sort of how they would accept a world war. And then World War II being, all right, well, here's the real deal. That was our test run. Now the real deal. We've got better weapons now.
It always comes in threes.
It does. So we know the exoteric story about what sparked off World War I with Archduke Ferdinand and all that. Do we know, just off the top of your head, if there's any tie-in to these families to that?
Well, yeah, supposedly. Well, I mean, if you look at all of the major countries, Russia, Spain, France, England, they're all cousins. Remember, they're all the Queen's cousins. Right. So if you look at that of the bloodline, and then you look who financially backed all of the countries was the Rothschilds, and that's not conspiracy. That's literal fact. They So without saying it, you heard the expression, there were 6 million Jews killed in the world wars, and there was 100 million white people. Mm-hmm. So was it a Jewish Holocaust, or was it a?
Yeah, I got you. Okay, it's a hard one.
So, but and that gets and people get banned off YouTube for saying that all the time. But if you
here we go.
There goes roadway. Sorry.
But honestly, if you look at how many people were killed in the world, it was sick. It was a X amount of this type of people and infinite more. So some of the conspiracy guys, like us, say it was just a simple way to kill off a whole bunch of the world's population, to test a bunch of future weapon systems, to gain bigger control of the market, to centralize money. Because what happened after the war, World War II, or World War I and World War II, because you have the International Bank of Settlements, you have the IMF, you have the World Bank, all were established at that point. and everybody has checks and balances except for those banks. There's nobody checks those banks.
Right, and then look at it from the technology side. Without those two wars, we wouldn't have airplanes. We wouldn't have jet engines after World War II. We wouldn't have nuclear power. We wouldn't have you name it.
The other theory is that's how they told us about it.
Right.
They had it. They had it. But
You can take that back to the Nimza Era Club at that point, right?
There you go. How would they show us those kind of things unless, oh, look at this new technology we just invented so that it will help us kill people.
So it's almost like they were revealing technology as the war went along. So and we have reports of what they call them, the Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
The little white lights and all that fun stuff. So it's almost like, okay, well, humanity's ready to accept this, but they're still calling that a UFO. So we're going to nix that, and all these different.
If you believe in the breakaway civilization, then that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It's a way of literally showing the world what they have.
And we know they're obsessed with prophecy, so regaining the Holy Land is important for whatever their future plans entail.
No doubt. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Subvert prophecy and make it seem like it was headed their way all along.
Yeah, so the Holy Land, and obviously, like we talked about earlier, all of the other energetic sites on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and after that, it's also when they hit away Antarctica. Right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So you have that whole ball of wax.
Man, the only thing we got to add now is black goo somehow. Come on.
No, I think we can do it. We can find black.
We can do anything. I believe in us.
I imagine that.
We know the Nazis are connected to black goo because they're on that island, that fucking island, Thule Island.
Thule.
You can tie that into the Rockefellers easy, right? I mean, Standard Oil.
Oh, true.
I mean, that black goo is really easy to tie into it, because if they control the oil, they would control the black goo too. Because that'd be the way they could be finding it. Nobody would argue it's a black substance they're sucking on. You wouldn't be able to know any different.
True, amen.
Dr. Sala would be proud.
Yes. Doctor. All right, so
I did that on purpose.
Some people probably don't even watch this show anymore, so they wouldn't know. What is the best way to disempower the mechanisms of the Astors stranglehold on the world?
Oh, Lord.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Teaching other people. I don't know. Go ahead.
We're doing it right now.
So you used a term that I liked earlier, Lee. You were talking about, you called it a spider web when we were talking about everything that they control.
Right.
And that's probably the easiest way to look at it. If it's a spider web, you're caught in it. You can snip away this line, snip away this line. You're still caught by 15 other lines, and that spider is going to come back over and wrap you back up again because you're wiggling around. So,
nice analogy.
How do you escape from that? Probably the easiest way to escape from that is wait till they come get you and stab them. I don't know, like Frodo did in Lord of the Rings, right?
The mind would be the only awakening people's minds, because you're, like Claude said, you're not physically getting out of it because they control it all so tightly. You have to work. Mm-hmm. You have to buy food. This
is. I feel like with the way that money is in modern day society, and I'm sure you guys probably agree, it's the perfect form of slavery, because you've got slaves that do all the work for you, and they're happy to do it.
Happy to do it. Yes, exactly, and beg to do it more.
Yeah. Please, more work. Yeah. You've got, in fact, people are working more overtime now in 2018 than in the history of the United States before labor unions and all that. So, and they ended up having to do labor unions because the slaves were unhappy. So they give labor unions and they give you the 8-hour work week, gets you comfortable again. And then here we are 60 years later, whatever it is, and you're begging for more overtime again.
Correct.
Right? So,
like I said, it's a perfect system, like everything they contrive, actually.
Well, and we're less likely to fight back against it anymore because we're more like, cold into being, I don't know, sappy little bitches. Like, I feel like we used to be, I feel like we used to be like, no, we'll keep our guns and we'll fucking fight you if you try to fuck with our land or our family or our, and now we're like, oh, we'll try to vote you away, I guess.
Well, let me throw a wrench into that real quick, because one thing that's really getting me lately, and I like to go back to the Japanese quote from World War II. They said, if we will never invade the United States mainland because there will be a rifle behind every blade of grass. perfect, right? So we were protected back then. Now, the gun laws that they do, I don't care what they say, they do want to strip our gun rights away. And
Absolutely.
just I think it was just in the last month, the first real step for that has happened with this new red flag law that's happened. Did you guys hear about this?
Law?
The red flag law is if someone reports you anonymously saying that you're unstable in any way, they can come take your guns. I think that the red flag law.
What the fuck? Everyone is fucking unstable to someone.
The first killing, the first police killing from that law just happened. I think it was yesterday.
I saw that. Yes.
So
what do you mean the police killing from that law?
So this sheriff, he got a call saying, "Oh, this guy's twisted off in his head and he's got a gun." So here goes the sheriff's office. They go out there and they knock on the guy's door and say, "We're here for your firearms. We had a red flag complaint against you." And the guy decided, "No, dude, you're not taking my gun." The cops shot him.
Fuck. And he's
shot
dead?
him cold dead.
What the fuck? And that's not all over the news right now?
It was I saw it on a little blurb on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So
in Washington, we just passed a law that also restricting gun laws or gun access in so many ways. Like the age limit went up and the type of guns you can own and like what is considered an assault gun and all this fucking stupid bullshit. And we passed it. We were like, yeah, take it away.
Yeah.
South Carolina and Texas, and you don't give a fuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, only then you don't get weed either. So,
Man, no perfect play.
But it's fun. If you look at it from those red flag laws, what the really scary part about that, it's really truly opening society up to see something, say something. Right?
Correct. Yes, absolutely. Tattletales.
1984 style.
Yep.
Rat your neighbors out. You're a good citizen if you do it. I remember, this is a silly story, but I was driving one morning and this kid slid off the road a little. It was kind of wet or whatever. He's going around a corner and I pulled over to like see if he was okay. Another lady pulled over and she pulled out her phone and we both were like, no, don't call anyone. Like, duh. I guess if you're like ghetto poor, you don't call people because you want to drive away without a ticket and you don't want cops involved and you don't want your insurance to know. And she like got scared of us saying don't call and went and sat in her car and called. And we're just like, don't call. And she wouldn't not call. And she called. And I was just like, we were both looking at each other like, duh, but what's wrong with this bitch? Don't call the police. People.
Have to tell the masters. Oh,
they're trained.
Yeah.
Trained.
She was trained and she was scared of us because we weren't as trained as her.
That's right.
We weren't threatening her. We were just like trying to like, hey, explain, like, don't call the police. Whatever. Anyway, that's how people are.
And that gets to that whole programming thing, people that aren't, that don't show the same level of respect to their masters are scary, right?
Yeah.
So,
correct.
They're dangerous because they're going to get you in trouble too.
Yeah.
So I like this quote from Fritz Springmeyer again. He says, in 1894, John Jacob wrote a novel, A Journey in Other Worlds, where he describes a society which operates on the idea of conserving energy. Strange how the elite like to promote conservation among us cattle. And they wrote that in 1894. So, and it ties back to like, how do we disempower these mechanisms of control? And I think part of it is seeing through their agendas and kind of like Lee was saying, like educating other people about it as well. But first you have to see it yourself, and see what the game that they're playing. And that is part of what they're terrified that you'll do.
Oh, they manufacture all of it. They manufacture energy crises. They manufacture water crises. They manufacture food crisis, global warming.
Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah.
That's what it says on the Georgia Guidestones. That's what it says.
Yeah.
So
and Agenda 21.
If they're manufacturing these crises and they get enough people believing in them, they could just sit back and watch. What's that meme that was shared the other day? Do a civil war.
Do a civil war, yeah. That is what it's like.
Oh yeah, global warming's fun because all the scientists came out being falsified information. All this truth is out there, and your everyday Joe literally says, "Oh yeah, but global warming." Like really? It's only been debunked 4 million times.
Yes. And then remember how they came out? So like the information was debunked over and over again. And then they came out and changed all the information.
They just changed the information. Correct.
They just changed it. And they're like, and you're like, well, why? And they're like, oh, because the mechanisms, things, they weren't reading properly. And so we're adjusting it. It's like,
they do the same thing with the fossil record.
You're
They do the
literally
same
just
thing
going
with the
back and
fossil
changing
record. It's
information, you
ridiculous.
fucking
They
assholes.
just moved the bar is all they did. They just like,
God damn it.
let's raise it up here. Let's lower it down here.
But now no one thinks about that. No one questions it. And now when people go look at the information, they're like, oh shit, look at what it said. That's what they got way back then. It's like, no, that was literally changed. They told you they changed it.
The world didn't get any warmer for 15 years, but global warming's real.
God damn it.
But that's their game that they play in every situation, whether you're talking about politics, global warming, whatever it is. The stock market, they play that same game. I just read something the other day. Whenever I think it was when Jeff Sessions was first made Attorney General. Somebody said it was unconstitutional, or no, it was when Robert Mueller was appointed. They said it broke some sort of constitutional law anyway. And so Trump was tweeting, it's not constitutional, whatever. And then it went away. Here we are later. He appoints this new guy, and no, it's coming back. Only it's the other side saying it this time.
That's right.
It seems like that's the way that it always works. So we're gonna say global warming's bad. They're gonna say it's good. It's gonna flop. We're gonna say it's bad. They're gonna say it's good, and it's gonna go back and forth because it does that in everything.
It's like endless
that's
distraction.
And that's it's a laser pointer.
Yeah,
Cats
for
follow.
the cats. Yeah,
That's
Like
all.
a civil war.
like the political system itself. Yeah, like the political system itself. The Democrats, they were for slavery. Oh yeah, imagine that.
Can't possibly be true because that's not what I feel like at this moment.
Oh, my feels. We're hurting
Okay.
everybody's feels tonight.
Let's wrap it up with some final words of wisdom for the people listening at home.
I think that rather than trying to break out of the spider web, learn how the spider web works, research this information for yourself, suss the truth of it out for yourself. Don't trust everything that the three of us are saying on this. Mm-hmm. Find out who these people were. Find out where we were or where they were to find out where they're going, because it's all there. It's all a story. And we talked about how they usually reveal their intent years beforehand with stories like Titan, the Titanic, things like that.
That's right.
So do your research, look it up. Don't be afraid of research, and don't be a fucking NPC. Stay out of echo chambers. Don't be afraid to argue.
Remember that they lie about everything, but everything's not a lie. And by that, they tell you a whole lot of truth while they're lying at you also. So your job is to find out what they're telling the truth about and what they're lying about. But I tell that to people lots of time. They lie about everything, but everything's not a lie. So when you figure that riddle out, you'll understand how all this game works.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love both of those. I think they both connect too, because like at the crux of it all, you can use their web and their tools against them, right? Like they gave us this internet, and it was not for what it wasn't for awakening yourself and finding the truth, but a lot of people used it for that. And like, chemtrails are fucking killing us all, but you could still point to them in the sky to people and be like, yo, do you think clouds should be perpendicular? Because they're not naturally. Like, what do you think about that? Like you can use their shit against them in a lot of ways as well.
But it's just water. What do you mean?
Totally just water.
Hey, I was actually on the contrail team for so long. You know who convinced me otherwise? James Marr. Yeah. A little long ago, he convinced me that chemtrails are a real thing. So props to you, buddy.
Nice job. Yeah, I got to wake people up. There's a lot of people that don't want to believe shit like that is real because it's terrifying to think about that. Like your airways are all poison, but you can watch a plane fly by with a regular contrail and it doesn't do shit. And you can watch another plane fly by in the exact same place at the same time, and all of a sudden this fucking giant pile of shit is in the sky.
Well, I fell for the old conditioning when I didn't believe in it because I worked on F-16s. I worked on jet engines. And I was like, no, they don't do that, because I worked on this. I know how they work. Fuck you. I guess I didn't. So, and that's the perfect thing for look into it,
Compartmentalization.
Yeah.
Everybody only knows what they know. That's how it works. They don't have to hide it from everybody, just a select few. Everybody else does their job, and then you don't question, you don't ask about the guy next to you's job, and nobody knows.
Oh, but you know what? If everybody's got their noses stuck into video games, they're never going to look into nothing.
There you go.
Just to tie it all back around.
Yeah, old Vivendi, old Napoleon's company.
Oh God. Well, I'm sure we'll delve into that.
That's coming up at one of the future
That's a Rothschild.
episodes.
That's a Rothschild. Yeah, that's a Rothschild episode.
Oh yeah.
So we are going to do the DuPonts next Sunday, and we're going to have Lee, Claude. I think Ben can't join us, but we are going to have our special guests, Sean Brisson and Michael Wan, which will be exciting. So that is going to be cool. So you guys should all tune in for more expose on the bloodlines of the Illuminati. So, friends, this has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to the man, Lee Chapman. Lee, thanks for being here.
Thank you, guys.
To our unofficial co-host and official dear friend and brother, Claude Furry. Claude, thanks for being here.
Very welcome.
And after the unmasking of the ancient bloodlines that aim to rule the world and seem to have been doing so for hundreds, if not thousands of years, it's difficult to feel safe in the world. The best remedy for such fears of what seem like impossibly large giants of impossible power is to remember this. We know our strength is tenfold in connection. One thing the enemy always has is an Achilles heel, and a soft spot in the throats of these particular bitches is their unfathomable hubris. They lack so much, and they know not what they do. Never fear an enemy that can't connect with the true force of goodness in this universe, for they will never be more powerful than you. Look at all of their games. They're all meant to convince you that you are nothing, that you are worthless, and that you are powerless, but you are not. And their main fear is that you remember that you are powerful, that you are worthy, and that you are everything. So as always, never forget who you truly are and continue to travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
Later, folks.